Hey everybody, Paul Mack here. Here is a viewer question I received from Chris, who wrote me through the Farmhands Companion Facebook page. He says, I'm ready to use my chainsaw mill. I saw you place your logs waist high. I don't have a tractor. Can you give a suggestion on how to lift a heavy 10-foot long log? Well, yes, Chris, I think I can. And I think many other of you may have the same question. Chainsaw mills are now very popular. It's an inexpensive way to get into sawing a small amount of lumber for weekend projects or whatever around the farm. Very easy to use. But the deal is it's easier to use that chainsaw mill if you can get those logs up to a comfortable height to where you're not bending over. The other alternative is crawling on the ground on your knees and moving that saw, which, although is doable, quite uncomfortable. And what I did to get around all that was to build some supports. They were really made out of just pine logs that I sawed a notch in the top so that the log won't roll off of it. And they're supported on the bottom by some boards that are nailed into the base so they won't topple over. Two of those, you place the log on top of it, but the question is, how do you get that log up there? I use my tractor with a boom pole on the back and some grabs to lift those logs to that height to get them up there. But suppose you're like Chris, you don't have a tractor, and how do you get those heavy logs up there without, hurting yourself or breaking your toes? Well, there are at least 3 ways I can think of that I would try if I didn't have my tractor. The first way would be a gin pole setup, G-I-N, gin pole setup, and it's sort of like a primitive crane. It involves a singular tree or log, a pole, I should say, a pole that pivots in one spot on the ground, and of course you can dig you a little hole in the ground so that pole, the bottom of that pole doesn't slip out or slide out or scoot out or whatever. And I'll draw the ground here. And the top of the pole is anchored with about 3 ropes. Now, keep in mind there's many different configurations of a gin pole. It's up to the imagination and safety. You want to do this safe because this is a heavy pole. Even a light pole falling on your head would make for a bad day. And so with the use of ropes attached quite securely here, you might have one rope going to the back and then a couple of lateral ropes that secure it this way so that it doesn't, wobble back and forth. I'll color that so you make sure you know it's a pole there. There we go. There you go. And the others are the ropes here. And to the top of this, however you configure that and however you fasten it, would be a block and tackle device, sort of like this one right here. Basically, some pulleys and a lot of rope, which helps a man like me lift objects much heavier than himself. Physically, I have no idea how that works. It still boggles my mind how a series of pulleys can help you lift something much larger than yourself. I don't know how that works, but it works. I know how it works. I just don't know how it works, if you follow what I'm saying. So you would attach a block and tackle here. That's my beautiful block and tackle right there. And maybe have some grabs on it like that for lifting logs. Here's my grabs that I use on my tractor or whatever. And so that would attach to the hook on the block and tackle. And of course your rope, the rope that you control it with, that you lift with, you can either be standing back here and lift it that way, or you could put a pulley down low and have the rope going this way, and you could pull laterally. Like if you're pulling with you'd have to have another guy doing that, pulling with a team of horses or a donkey or a mule or whatever. Or you could just yourself just hoist it up right where you're standing. The advantage is with these, this can move a log from this way laterally and then straight up, and you might have your supports, underneath here, and you would lift that log up and place it right there on your supports. So that would be the use of a gin pole. And you can go online and you can do a search for various gin poles. You come up with some old photos of gin poles being used, factory settings or logging settings or railroad settings and so forth. And again, there's a number of different ways to configure that gin pole. You just want to be sure that you're safe and out from under danger should anything go wrong, because this is farming. Things go wrong. A lot of times this configuration was used to lift logs in log building, because many times a normal log building might be 18 by 16 foot. Well, an 18-foot log, well, shoot, even a 16-foot log that's that big around is, you're talking about lifting it up over your head. Even two people would struggle doing that. So a gin pole setup would be easy to move around and over each wall or whatever, and then lift that log up safely and put it in place, notch your corners. You could use a gin pole to hoist engines if you're a mechanic type, to pull up big rocks. Or what about lifting a truss on a house? You've built some trusses, kind of like the trusses I built on this workshop. You might need to lift those trusses up to put them in place. And so a gin pole setup would be very useful for all those kinds of things on the farm or homestead. And keep in mind, a gin pole does not have to be, towering, 3 stories tall. It only needs to be tall enough to get the job done. And the pole needs to be stout enough that whatever you're lifting, that it doesn't break the pole. So they don't have to be humongous. They just have to work for what you need. Now, a variation on the gin pole might be just simply a tripod type gin poles situation, where you've got 3 poles kind of like that, and they're bound together at the top, maybe with a chain. They need to be bound securely, maybe ratchet straps, ropes that are tied very well, stout ropes tied very well. Again, you want to be safe. You don't want any of this falling on your head. And again, I might dig a little shallow hole at each spot just so those poles don't kick out. The disadvantage here is that these legs aren't going anywhere, and so they can get in the way. The gin pole, the ropes can be stretched out further. You don't have, there's no need for 50-foot poles when you have 50-foot of rope to stretch those out and get them out of the way. But in this situation, the legs can be in your way. The other thing is, this is more of a vertical lift. You're lifting, you can pull the log in there this way, and then you're basically lifting the log straight up to get it up on those vertical posts. Again, you want to be careful when you're maneuvering that log around. Things happen. These things can slip. The other thing to keep in mind is that, remember that your block and tackle takes up about a couple of feet. Your grabs take up another couple of feet, and you're going to want that log about 3 foot off the ground. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 foot from here to here, which means you might want this distance to be 8 or 9 foot, which means your poles need to be at least 12 foot or larger, just so you have enough room to operate under that thing. The second way I might attempt lifting a log up under the supports would be the use of a ramp. Actually, a couple of stout poles that you can notch out to where they're sitting on the supports to give them a little more stability, and then maybe shoot a screw or a big nail down into the support just so that it doesn't wobble off. You want this to be safe, again. And then you would have your log down here, and you could roll your log up onto the ramp and there using a cant hook like this. This is used to, you grab onto a log and you can roll the log up the ramp. A cant hook, C-A-N-T. Very useful tool to have around. I recommend you trying to find one, buy one. If you can all have it, you're going to find it useful for moving big logs when you're cutting firewood and everything. You just want to make sure, now, be safe, Chris. If you're rolling a log up this ramp, you want to make sure that that log is not so heavy that if you get in a bind and it starts coming back that way, you're in some kind of danger. So this is only good for logs that you can manageably roll up this ramp. Now, if it's a bigger log and you feel a little bit unsure about rolling that log up, and you being in between these ramps as you're rolling it up. There's a couple other things you can do. One of them is to maybe find a hillside to where this ramp system is not quite so steep, and then it's not so much of a problem to roll a heavy log over, and the supports would be downhill and this would be uphill. So it would not be so difficult to roll a log laterally on a more level plane over to the supports. The other way you could do this without a hillside is kind of an old-fashioned way that they used to load logs on wagons back in the day before they had winches or tractors. They would use a team of horses, mules, oxen, or whatever, and some chains. And here's how that would work. You would have, well, here's how it would work here in application without a wagon. Just imagine instead of a wagon, you've got these supports that you're trying to roll the log up on. A couple of poles would be placed, in that instance, on the side of the wagon, the bed of the wagon, or on the wheels, actually. In this instance, the poles are placed on your supports like normal. And back here, you would have some point at which you could fasten something. Maybe it's a pole or something. And over here, you would have, let's see how I'm going to draw this. You would have a chain, one long chain that goes down here. Man, my chain looks terrible. And then the chain comes back this direction and is fastened to this support here. Now, you would roll your log over on top of the chain, that loop in the chain, and then you would take another chain and hook on to the center of this loop here on this chain, and now I'm going to erase that chain. This could be, it doesn't have to be a chain, it can be a cable. I don't know if I'd use a rope unless it's very, very stout. A steel cable or a chain, and I'm going to erase this part here because actually the chain or the cable is under the log now. And so you could, using a come-along, that's my come-along, it's not a very good come-along. The come-along is attached to this post. Using the come-along, you could winch back and forth until you're rolling this log up the ramp and onto the support to where you could saw it. And then you lift the chain back over it, saw your log, and then you're good to go. So, and over here you could have you don't have to have a come-along. You could have a hand-cranked winch, kind of like what you might have on a boat trailer or something, or an electric winch, if you're an electrical, modern kind of guy. You could have some kind of winch that hooks onto this cable or chain and pulls it, rolls the log up the supports. So anyway, that's another cool way to lift, especially a big log that you don't want to be downhill of that log if something should happen. So that would be your third way of moving a heavy log without a tractor. Chris, I hope that helps. Again, one more time. Overkill in this situation when you're dealing with heavy things that are over your feet or your body, overkill never hurts. Make the thing sturdy, whether it's the poles, the supports, or everything. Just make double sure that everything is sturdy, Chris, because I do not want to assist in making your wife a widow, if you know what I mean. Now, maybe you're interested in making your own lumber with a chainsaw mill. I've got a number of videos on the topic of making lumber with a chainsaw mill you're going to want to look at. I'll have those links in the description below. Or maybe you've got another question about anything I've mentioned today, or a completely different question on anything farm or homestead related. Please leave it in the comment section below. I enjoy reading those. I enjoy answering them. If I like them, we'll put your question on the show and we'll answer it. So, I'm Paul Mack. Until next time, I'll talk at you later. John Racine, 4589. It's like the logs love each other and they want to kiss. Philip Madden, UK4 FY. Number one tool in any shop, homestead, or garage is always a hammer. LOL. How did that not even make the list? Well, to be honest, Philip, it would have been number 21. had I gone on that far. And though I do love my collection of hammers, I just figure if I'm ever without one and I have a nail that needs pounding, I can always pick up a rock and use that, which I've done from time to time in a pinch.